He saved her from a street dog. But she had no idea how much she owed him. A simple act of kindness changes everything. What starts as a rescue turns into a shocking mystery, revealing secrets, a hidden fortune, and a life neither of them could have imagined. Will gratitude, fate, and destiny collide in the most unexpected way? Watch till the very end to see how one small act can change lives forever. Like, share, and subscribe if you love heartwarming, mysterious, and life-changing stories. The evening air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and the faint tang of smoke from nearby street stalls. The city's hum was a low, persistent murmur, a mixture of distant horns, barking dogs, and hurried footsteps. On a narrow alleyway tucked between crumbling brick buildings, a young girl stumbled backward, her eyes wide with terror. A street dog, lean and vicious-looking, lunged at her with snarling teeth, its growl echoing off the walls. She screamed, the sound sharp and desperate, but the dog was relentless. Her white dress, already dirtied by the city's grime, clung to her trembling frame. Panic surged through her as she backed toward a corner, trapped. Then came the shadow. The old man appeared like a figure out of nowhere. His clothes were simple, worn and slightly stained from years of labor. But there was something in his stance, a quiet confidence, a steady resolve, that made the air around him seem to pause. With one swift motion, he grabbed a broken wooden stick from the ground and shoved it toward the dog. The animal yelped, snapped, and retreated a few steps, confused by the sudden movement. The girl froze, still breathing heavily, her hands clutching at her chest. The man's eyes softened as he took in her fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice deep but calm. No, I'm fine," she stammered, though her voice trembled. He nodded once, letting the tension ebb slightly. "Good. You need to be careful around here." She looked at him, her mind racing. He was just there, a stranger. And yet, without a word, he had risked himself to save her. She wanted to thank him, to tell him something. But the words got stuck in her throat. She didn't know why, but she felt a strange, almost overwhelming sense that this moment was important. That it wasn't just an ordinary rescue. "Thank you," she whispered finally, barely audible. The old man simply nodded again, his eyes scanning the street as if to make sure the danger had truly passed. He said nothing more and turned to walk away. She called after him, her voice catching. "Wait, I want to thank you properly." He paused but didn't turn around. "Just be careful," he said, then disappeared into the shadows of the alley. The girl stood there, heart pounding, replaying the scene in her mind. She didn't know the man's name. She didn't know where he lived or anything about him. But something inside her whispered that she owed him, though she didn't understand why exactly, or what form that debt would take. The girl's name was Evelyn. Most people assumed she was just another ordinary child lost in the chaos of the city streets. But the truth was far more complicated. Evelyn had grown up in the lap of luxury, hidden from the public eye, yet accustomed to the isolation and expectations that came with being the daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the country. She often wandered incognito, craving the anonymity of the streets, the rawness of life that her gilded mansion could never provide. On that fateful evening, she had slipped away from her driver and bodyguards, drawn by curiosity and a desire to see the world beyond her golden cage. She never imagined she would end up face to face with a stray dog and, ultimately, the old man who would change her life forever. The old man's name was Thomas. He was a retired factory worker, a man who had seen hardship and loss in a way that hardened his exterior, but also nurtured an unspoken kindness. Thomas had lived his entire life in the lower quarters of the city, invisible to the wealthy elite who passed him by daily. He knew the streets, the dangers, the hidden paths, the people who needed help but were too afraid to ask for it. That evening, Thomas hadn't expected to encounter anyone. He had been on his way home, thinking about nothing in particular, when the sounds of distress reached him. Helping someone was second nature, though, even if he rarely got thanks. The girl's white dress, her pale skin, her terrified eyes, something about her tugged at a memory he didn't quite place. Maybe it was her fear, maybe it was the sense of helplessness. Whatever it was, he couldn't ignore it. Days passed, Evelyn couldn't shake the memory of the old man who had saved her. She found herself thinking about him constantly, wondering where he was, what his life was like, and how she could repay him. It became an obsession, though she didn't understand why. Something in her gut told her that this wasn't just a small act of kindness. It was the beginning of something far bigger. Meanwhile, Thomas returned to his quiet, modest life, unaware that the girl he had saved was no ordinary child. Evelyn had resources beyond imagination, a life of wealth and opportunity that he had only ever seen in passing glimpses from his neighborhood. And unbeknownst to Thomas, Evelyn was determined to find a way to repay her debt. Evelyn began to investigate. She asked discreet questions, making sure no one realized her true identity. She traced the alley where the incident occurred, spoke with neighbors, and quietly pieced together the life of the man who had saved her. She discovered small acts of kindness he had performed for others in the neighborhood, his modest home and the struggles he endured daily. Every discovery deepened her admiration, and every detail made her more determined. This was more than gratitude. This was destiny, she realized. The universe had intervened that night, placing Thomas in her path for reasons she was only beginning to understand. When Evelyn finally approached Thomas, not with her fortune, not with her family's name, but as herself, she felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Would he believe her? Would he accept her help? Thomas, of course, was skeptical. He had seen many people claim to care, only to disappear when it was inconvenient. But there was something different about this girl. She wasn't asking for a story, a photo, or recognition. She simply wanted to repay a debt. "I don't need your money," Thomas said gruffly, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity. "I know," Evelyn replied softly. "I want to do more than just give you money. I want to make sure your life changes because of that night, because of what you did for me." It was the beginning of a bond neither of them expected, a journey that would weave through mystery, secrets, and revelations that would test their trust, their courage, and their understanding of what it truly means to owe someone your life. Days after their first encounter, Thomas noticed subtle changes around his modest neighborhood. Small kindnesses he had long been accustomed to receiving rarely from strangers now seemed almost orchestrated. Groceries appeared at his doorstep, wrapped neatly in paper bags, accompanied by polite notes that read little more than, "Just something to help." At first he thought it might be the neighbors, trying to return the goodwill he had quietly spread over the years. But there was an unusual precision in the timing, and a care in the presentation that made him pause. Evelyn, meanwhile, worked quietly behind the scenes. She had observed Thomas from afar, studied his daily routines, and sought ways to improve his life without revealing who she really was. It wasn't just money she wanted to give him. It was the chance for dignity, security, and a life free from the constant struggle he endured. Every donation was deliberate, every small act of assistance carefully planned. She wanted him to feel supported, not pitied. One evening, as Thomas returned from a long shift delivering supplies at a local shelter, he noticed a small envelope tucked under his door. The handwriting was neat and unfamiliar. He tore it open and found a note. "Meet me at the corner cafe tomorrow morning. I want to talk." A curiosity gnawed at him. Who was he? He had no idea, but something about the note felt earnest, compelling even. Against his better judgment, he decided to go. The next morning, the cafe was quiet, the sun casting golden streaks across the streets. Thomas entered cautiously, scanning the small tables. There, seated near the window, was Evelyn. She looked ordinary at first glance, simple clothing, a calm demeanor. But there was an air about her that spoke of refinement and confidence he couldn't place. "Good morning," she said softly, standing as he approached. "Morning," Thomas replied, unsure what to say next. He glanced at her hands, folded neatly on the table, and then at her eyes, which seemed to hold a careful mixture of determination and vulnerability. "I wanted to meet you in person," Evelyn began. "I've been trying to help you," quietly without making a fuss, but I felt it was time to speak directly. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Help me? You don't even know me." "That's true," she admitted, "but I owe you my life. That night in the alley, you saved me, and I can't stop thinking about it. I want to repay that debt in whatever way I can. Thomas felt a tight knot in his chest. He had never expected gratitude to take this form. Most people said thank you and moved on. Few remembered the faces of those who had truly touched their lives. And yet here she was, persistent, yet gentle, and undeniably sincere. I don't know what to say, he murmured, looking down at his hands. I'm just an ordinary man. You don't owe me anything. You don't understand, Evelyn said, leaning in slightly. It's not just money. I can help you with your life, your home, your future. But I can't do it if you refuse to let me try. Thomas studied her, searching for any trace of deception, but found none. She wasn't seeking fame or recognition. She wasn't asking for anything in return. It was gratitude, plain and simple, but somehow more powerful than he had ever imagined. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn became a quiet presence in his life, leaving envelopes of support, offering subtle guidance, and helping Thomas navigate challenges he had long accepted as permanent. Repairs were made to his worn-down home, bills were quietly covered, and supplies were sent for his small community efforts. And through it all, Thomas noticed a strange, unspoken understanding forming between them, yet mysteries lingered. Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn was hiding something. Her confidence, her knowledge, the way she seemed to anticipate his needs, it was almost too precise. Questions lingered in his mind. Who was she really? Why did she care so much? And why now? One evening, as Thomas returned from a long day at the market, he noticed a sleek black car parked near the corner of his street. It seemed out of place, too polished, too deliberate. A driver stepped out and left a small package at his door. When Thomas opened it, he found a brand new briefcase filled with organized documents, receipts, and a ledger marked with meticulous notes. Among the items was a note written in the same neat handwriting as before. Use this to organize your life, Thomas. There's more coming, trust me. He stared at the package, bewildered. Who was this girl? And what exactly was she planning? Meanwhile, Evelyn watched from a distance, heart pounding. She had orchestrated every detail carefully, but she knew that revealing too much too soon could overwhelm Thomas. She wanted him to accept her help, but on his own terms, without feeling obligated or patronized. She also wrestled with the secret she hadn't yet told him, that her family's wealth and her position in society were far beyond anything he could imagine. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets, Thomas finally sat down in his small living room. He opened the briefcase again, carefully examining the contents. It was overwhelming, resources, tools, support, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in decades, he felt a sense of hope, a glimmer of possibility that life could be more than survival. And somewhere in the city, Evelyn smiled quietly to herself. The first steps had been taken. The debt had begun to be repaid, but she also knew that bigger challenges were ahead. Secrets would be revealed, decisions would need to be made, and the bond between them would be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Weeks had passed, and Thomas's life was changing in ways he had never imagined. The small improvements Evelyn had introduced began to accumulate into something transformative. His home, once sagging and weathered, now stood firm, repaired with care. Supplies for the community center where he volunteered arrived regularly. Even the neighborhood itself seemed to shift subtly. People smiled more, walked taller, as if hope had begun to trickle into the cracks of their lives. And yet, Thomas remained cautious. Every gift, every gesture of help, no matter how thoughtful, came with a shadow of uncertainty. Who was Evelyn, really? She never spoke of herself, never revealed her background, and never hinted at her true wealth. Her presence was generous but mysterious, and that mystery gnawed at him. One afternoon, he spotted her across the street, slipping discreetly out of a sleek car. Her appearance startled him. She was dressed elegantly, almost unrecognizably refined. There was no mistaking it now. She was not an ordinary girl from the neighborhood. She radiated confidence and power that far exceeded anything Thomas could have imagined. "Evelyn," he called, his voice carrying over the street. She paused, smiling faintly. "Hello, Thomas. I didn't want to startle you. Startle me? Who are you, really?" His words came out in a rush, curiosity and caution mixing. She hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. I've told you everything that matters about why I'm here, Thomas frowned. But you're not ordinary. You're not just some girl from the streets. Her eyes softened, a flicker of sadness beneath the composure. You're right. I'm not ordinary, but that doesn't change why I'm here, or why I owe you everything. That night, you saved my life, and now I'm making sure I can save yours in return. The truth hung in the air like a delicate but heavy weight. Thomas could sense her power, her resources, even her social standing, yet she revealed none of it fully. Her restraint, her careful pacing, only made the mystery deepen. Days later, a challenge arrived that neither of them had anticipated. Thomas's community center, a hub for local children and struggling families, faced an abrupt closure due to bureaucratic complications and unpaid debts. He had no solution, and years of dedication seemed on the brink of being erased. Panic set in, but before despair could take root, Evelyn appeared at the door. I've arranged everything, she said quietly. The legal issues, the funds, it's all taken care of. You don't have to worry, Thomas stared at her, incredulous. All of it? How? Why? Because it matters, she replied, a gentle intensity in her voice. You've helped people in ways you don't even see. Now it's my turn to make sure you're helped too, but you have to trust me completely. For the first time, Thomas realized the true scale of her assistance. He understood that her generosity wasn't just a series of small gestures. It was a carefully orchestrated plan, a life-altering force she had wielded quietly, with precision. And yet, there remained a gap between gratitude and understanding, between what he knew and what he didn't. That night, Thomas sat alone, staring out the window. The city lights flickered like distant stars, but his thoughts were tangled with questions. Who was Evelyn, really? What did she truly want? And why had fate brought her into his life in such an improbable, almost magical way? Evelyn, meanwhile, watched from afar. She knew the moment of revelation was approaching, the time when Thomas would finally see who she really was, the full weight of her identity, her power, and her resources. And she also knew that once that veil lifted, nothing could remain the same. Their bond, built on gratitude and trust, would face its ultimate test. As the wind swept through the streets, carrying the hum of distant traffic and the faint laughter of children, Thomas felt a mixture of awe and trepidation. His life had shifted irrevocably, yet the greatest twists were still ahead. He had been saved once, and now, in ways both visible and hidden, he was being lifted into a world he had never imagined existed. But in the shadows, the mystery remained. Evelyn's full identity, the depth of her fortune, and the reasons she had chosen him above all others lingered just out of reach. And that mystery, unbroken and unresolved, would drive them both into choices, challenges, and revelations that neither could foresee. The morning sun fell in pale streaks over the city, illuminating streets that had once felt familiar and safe to Thomas but now seemed tinged with uncertainty. The changes in his life, though undeniably positive, were beginning to feel overwhelming. Bills, repairs, and community projects that had once seemed impossible were now handled effortlessly. Yet the source of it all, the quiet, enigmatic presence of Evelyn, remained shrouded in mystery. That day, she appeared at his doorstep again, this time carrying a single folder and a small, understated envelope. Thomas eyed her cautiously. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm but carrying a weight that made him sit up straighter. "I need to show you something." She handed him the folder. Inside were documents, financial statements, and legal papers. Thomas flipped through them slowly, disbelief clouding his mind. The resources, the funds, the plans, they were staggering. He realized for the first time the full extent of her power and influence. "Evelyn, who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, finally allowing a hint of vulnerability to show. "I didn't want to tell you before, because I didn't want you to feel obligated or uncomfortable. But the truth is, I'm not just anyone. My family. We have means beyond what you could imagine. I didn't want that to overshadow why I'm helping you. I wanted it to be about gratitude, about the life you saved." Thomas leaned back, processing the revelation. Wealth, influence, power, These were things he had only seen from the outside. Yet here was Evelyn, standing before him, offering not just material support, but genuine care, entirely of her own volition. "You're a billionaire," he said finally, awe lacing every word. "Yes," she admitted, her gaze steady. "But that's not why I'm here. That night you saved me from a situation I can't even describe fully. The debt isn't about money. It's about life, about being given a second chance. And now I can help you live better because of it." Thomas felt a swell of emotion, gratitude, disbelief, and a hint of guilt. He had always believed that acts of kindness were small and fleeting, that one man's life was just one thread in the vast, chaotic tapestry of the city. Yet here was Evelyn, proving that a single act of courage could ripple through lives in ways he had never imagined. Over the next few days, Evelyn guided him more directly. She helped him establish programs at the community center, ensuring stability for those who depended on him. She arranged meetings with city officials, streamlined bureaucratic hurdles, and even discreetly set up trusts that would secure Thomas's future. Yet even as she offered all this, she never pressed herself into his life. She was a shadow, a guiding hand, ever present but unobtrusive. Still, mysteries lingered. Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than she had told. Something in the way she observed the world, in the way she calculated every move, hinted at experiences he could not imagine. And yet the more he wondered, the more he realized that it didn't matter, not yet. What mattered was that his life was changing in ways that once seemed impossible. One evening, as they walked through the quiet streets near the center, Thomas finally spoke the question that had been building inside him. "Evelyn, why me? Out of all the people in the world, why did you choose to help me?" She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Because you acted without expectation. Because you saved someone without thinking about reward, without questioning who they were. And the world, my world, your world, needs people like that. People who act out of pure kindness. You saved me. And in return, I want to help save the life you've built, the lives you touch every day." Thomas looked at her, awe and humility blending in his eyes. It was no longer just about gratitude or debt. It was about trust, about recognizing that some connections are meant to transcend social boundaries, wealth, and circumstance. It was about destiny and the invisible threads that weave lives together in unexpected ways. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows over the city streets, Thomas realized something profound. His life had been forever altered, not just by Evelyn's wealth or her resources, but by the simple, undeniable fact that someone had believed in him, seen him, and acted selflessly. And in that moment, he understood that some debts are not measured in money. They are measured in courage, trust, and the bonds that connect human hearts. The city's skyline glowed under the setting sun, a palette of gold and amber stretching across the horizon. Thomas stood on the balcony of his now fully restored home, breathing in the crisp evening air. The quiet hum of life below contrasted with the storm of emotions swirling inside him. For weeks he had felt the subtle yet profound shift in his existence. Every act of kindness, every opportunity that had arrived at his doorstep, had led him to this moment. And yet, one final revelation remained. One truth Evelyn had been keeping close, waiting for the right time to reveal. That evening, she arrived, this time without pretense, without envelopes or notes. Her attire was elegant yet understated, radiating confidence that no shadow could hide. Thomas felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension as she approached. "Thomas," she said softly, "there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you from the very beginning." He turned to her, steadying himself. "I think I can guess, but I want to hear it from you." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held secrets and warmth all at once. "I am who I am because of circumstances I did not choose. My family, we have resources, influence, power, but it is not the wealth that matters here. It's the choice to act, to help, to make a difference. That night when you saved me, you chose courage over fear. You acted without hesitation. That is why I am here." Thomas felt a lump in his throat. The enormity of it sank in, the full measure of her world, and yet how carefully she had shielded him from it until he could process the impact. Her generosity had never been about money. It had been about recognition, about respect, about preserving his dignity while giving him a chance to thrive. I don't know what to say," he whispered. "I never expected any of this." "You don't have to say anything," she replied. "Just accept it. Accept the life you've earned, the people you've touched, and the possibility of a future that's bigger than you imagined." Days turned into weeks, and Thomas began to embrace this new reality fully. The community center flourished. Local families benefited from programs he had never imagined possible, and Thomas himself found a sense of peace and purpose that had eluded him for decades. And through it all, Evelyn remained at his side, not as a shadow, not as a benefactor, but as a friend and confidant. Yet the final test of their bond came unexpectedly. A rival faction within the city, envious of the sudden improvements and the power behind them, sought to undermine Thomas's work. Threats arrived, subtle at first, then overtly aggressive. For the first time, Thomas faced real danger, not from poverty, not from circumstance, but from envy and malice. Evelyn was there, calm and composed, guiding him through every step. Her influence, her resources, and her connections ensured that the threat was neutralized, quietly but decisively. And in that moment, Thomas realized the depth of their partnership. She had given him not just material support, but protection, strategy, and unwavering loyalty. One evening, as they walked through the streets of the neighborhood they had transformed together, Thomas stopped and looked at her. "Evelyn, I understand now. Everything you've done, all of it, it's because of that night. And because of what you saw in me, but I want you to know something. I will never forget it. I will never forget you." Evelyn's eyes glistened faintly in the fading sunlight. "And I'll never forget you either. You showed me what courage looks like, and in return I've shown you what possibility looks like." The city lights flickered on as twilight descended, and Thomas felt a profound sense of completion. His life had been saved, transformed, and elevated, not by chance, not by wealth alone, but by the intertwining of two lives brought together by fate, courage, and an unspoken debt that had now been fulfilled. As the night settled over the streets, the two of them stood together, bound not by obligation, but by trust, gratitude, and the extraordinary bond of lives changed forever.